What it do, Cooks? It's your boy, The Hater, and I wanted to do a video on missed opportunities in the context of wrestling. Instead of doing a list of like 10 wrestlers that were missed opportunities, I'm going to talk about several wrestlers that will pop into my head as I do this video live, a cappella, motherfucks. Some of these are going to be recent wrestlers, and some others are going to be older wrestlers. But one thing that ties them together in common is the fact that, in my personal opinion, all these guys were missed opportunities. Again, I don't use that term lightly, right? And again, it should be noted that when I say missed opportunities, I'm not saying like one of the people on my list is going to be Cameron Grimes. I'm not saying Cameron Grimes was destined to be the next Triple H. Absolutely not. But Cameron Grimes should have had like a mid-card push. He should have been like a 1 or 2 time Intercontinental Champion. He's more interesting, let's say, than like Sami Zayn, right? That's what I'm saying. Everything will be put into place. Let's just say we talked about Cameron Grimes because who the hell cares about that? Here's another one. Dexter Lumis. Dexter Lumis is someone that came into WWE with a great look. He's a good-looking guy, but more importantly, he has this psychopathic look with the short, neatly kept hair, muscular guy, blacked out tattoos, and an actual gimmick. This guy deserved a bit more. Now, he's still around, and he's with the Wyatt family. But the Wyatt family is just, this is obviously a step back. Another missed opportunity. Eric Young. Eric Young's career speaks for itself, but Eric Young is one of the few wrestlers in history that, in my opinion, could do it all. Eric Young was believable as just a random-ass member of Team Canada. Then he was believable as a coward. Then he was believable as a guy who basically was stupid and retarded and became a comedy character. He was believable in that too. I didn't like that phase of Eric Young, but he was believable. Then, think about everything I'm talking about right now, right? Then he gets reintroduced as the leader of World Elite in AEW, in TNA, I should say, right? World Elite was the jobber faction, but Eric Young stood out and he felt like a leader. He could cut a hell of a promo. He could wrestle a hell of a match. And he had the charm and charisma to be able to pull out all these characters. By far, my favorite version of Eric Young was the world-class maniac Eric Young, where it's exactly what it sounds like. He's this crazy motherfucker that's willing to hurt people. And this took on many forms. And this is ultimately what got him signed to NXT. And that's what Sanity was. It was an extension of that. Then he carried this out in TNA and Violent by Design or whatever it was called. I watched a little bit of that. But Eric Young is a missed opportunity because he's someone that you could just take him. You could have him do everything he did in TNA, and that would work. He could do that again, and that would be better than having like Montez Ford on the roster or having Nathan Frazier on the roster, right? It would have been better. Now, when we talk about missed opportunities, I do want to talk about some more recent guys. Austin Theory. I mean, this guy, you can argue, was doomed from the beginning because his name is Austin Theory. But if you overlook that and you look at the talents that this guy has, all he needs is a better finisher and not to be bogged down by stupid-ass feuds. It looked like they were going to do it when he was having feuds with Lashley and Cena. But ultimately, it didn't pay off. And at this point, I am comfortable saying that he was a missed opportunity. Another one. Bray Wyatt. That's right. The guy that I say sucks, Bray Wyatt, was a missed opportunity. Because instead of focusing this guy as being like a Mankind type of wrestler, like a jobber to the stars, they insisted. The hell? Pardon the hater for that interruption. I was doing Hater Outdoors and I heard someone screaming, or so it sounded like. So I went to check up on them, but everything seems to be fine up in this piece. The hater lives in a really nice neighborhood, so these things don't normally happen to your boy. But, the hater is the people's hero, and the hater's not going to let anybody get hurt on his watch. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, let's go back to what I was saying. Bray Wyatt could have been a jobber. He could have been a lot of things, but they insisted on making him a main eventer. And that just never stuck because he would hit a ceiling. And that ceiling was called Randy Orton. Every time this guy would get a push, Randy Orton would be there to just bury him again, right? And this was a missed opportunity because he could have been a character with some longevity if he wasn't repackaged 15 times. If he just stuck to being Bray Wyatt, right? That's it. You had a character, it was an interesting enough character, you could have stuck with it. But because Bray Wyatt never lived up to his potential due to the aforementioned glass ceiling named Randy Orton, they felt the need to repackage this guy. And every repackaging just wasted basically, in total, years of Bray Wyatt's career. He spent like a year doing those stupid ass Firefly Funhouse things that people thought were great but were complete garbage, only to have The Fiend debut, and a few months later, The Fiend's getting his ass beat by Goldberg and Randy Orton. A complete failure. The Fiend is one of the worst characters of all time. The Uncle Howdy thing is an extension of that, and it's also completely garbage. Now, despite that, rest in peace, Bray Wyatt. You know, when he did wrestle, he put on some good matches. You know, like I said, one of my favorite modern matches is Bray Wyatt versus Daniel Bryan at Royal Rumble. It was a great match. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I expected Daniel Bryan to win like everybody else. And that was a good match because the unexpected happened. That was good. Now, I don't think any story that has to do with undervalued and missed opportunity talents can be complete without arguably the best example of this. Some of you are going to need to YouTube this because you don't know who it is I'm talking about. But there's a wrestler named Shawn O'Hare. Now, for those of you that watched during the Attitude Era, at the peak of WCW's reboot, which was not a good time, of course, but at the peak of that, WCW introduced a bunch of new wrestlers, right? There was these 4 guys. They were called like the Natural Born like killers or thrillers. It was like a pun on the movie, right? And they also had a manager who was pretty interesting and entertaining. There was 4 guys, and their gimmick was these guys are just built different. These guys are like young, good-looking, strong, big, athletic guys that are going to be the future of wrestling. Amongst them, and you could see why they go together, amongst them were Mark Jindrak, fucking Chuck Palumbo, remember him? He had a pretty decent career. There was another guy that I can't quite put my finger on because it was Palumbo and someone else, and Jindrak and O'Hare, right? And then that's somebody else. That's like the 4th guy. Maybe it was Johnny the Bull. It could have been Johnny the Bull. I don't think it was Johnny the Bull because he wouldn't fit. But there was another guy, basically. Who cares, right? That was a big deal. And these 2 tag teams feuded with each other. Then eventually they formed like a 4-man group. And in the 4-man group, they had a nice little shuffle where the 2 guys that had the most promise, Chuck Palumbo and Shawn O'Hare, became a tag team. And they were there in the early days of the Attitude Era, right? They were there, in the early days of the Invasion. And they were the WCW Tag Team Champions, I think, right? These 2 monsters. Shawn O'Hare specifically stuck out. Chuck Palumbo was pretty good too. You can even consider him a missed opportunity, right? Because he had a unique look, talented guy, big, strong, good looking, you know. He had the tools, but not as much as Shawn O'Hare. I've never seen the level of athleticism that Shawn O'Hare displayed. I'll put it to you this way. Back then, my favorite wrestler was Jeff Hardy. And Shawn O'Hare debuted on WCW. He's like 3 times Jeff Hardy's size. He's like 6'4", looks great, fucking jacked, right? And his finishing move was the Swanton Bomb, which was basically a Swanton Bomb, but better, right? Think about what I just said. It's a Swanton Bomb, but better. And this is also considering the fact that he's much larger than Jeff Hardy. So it's like, come on now. You know what I mean? This guy is fucking undeniable, right? Eventually, this guy his contract is picked up and he gets sent to developmental by WWE. And he debuts these vignettes with this, what has now been called the Devil's Advocate gimmick, right? Basically, it's a bunch of vignettes where Shawn O'Hare tells you to do things that are bad for you only because he enjoys like ruining lives, basically, right? Now, this gimmick itself is presented as this massive missed opportunity, which I could see why people say that, but I don't know how this gimmick would actually play out, right? What, he just comes out and gives bad advice? Maybe that would be it. But his look, everything about it, right, was just so marketable. Like, he grew his hair out, he would wear this overcoat, the promos were excellent, he was excellent in the ring in terms of his athleticism, but for some reason, this never led to anything. It led to a stupid stint with Roddy Piper, which established him as a jobber, contrary to what everyone expected. And then eventually this guy was fired. He did MMA. He got his ass beat a few times. He got into a bar fight where he got beat up or something. And then eventually, unfortunately, he hanged himself. And that's the one that I think was the biggest missed opportunity in wrestling. The primary reason behind that is because this guy, it's like you couldn't ask for a better blueprint for a wrestler, right? You couldn't ask. He was new. He was raw. He was green, as they say. But you couldn't ask for someone that had all the requirements built in. Charisma, good looks, athleticism, size, strength, and physique. He had all of these things in spades. But for some reason, it just didn't work out for him, right? And that's always been a big what if for the hater, right? The hater has always thought, man, what if they did this? This was a gimmick that you knew was not going to be presented as a main event gimmick, but it could have been. And last but not least, I still think Shawn O'Hare is the number one, but a close number two would be Muhammad Hassan. Again, for those that didn't watch wrestling back then, this was at the height of everyone being afraid of Muslims and Arabs. The Muhammad Hassan gimmick was that he was an Arab American, along with Daivari, and both of them were pissed off, basically, that America, their land, their homeland, had turned their back on him, right? Now, a lot of people say this was actually a face gimmick and nobody understood it. Obviously, it wasn't. They were heels, and this is why it was a brilliant gimmick, because the underpinnings of it were that Daivari and Muhammad Hassan didn't like America, right? Like that they never liked America, and this was their excuse to now do this, right? That was like, a lot of people didn't get this because, once again, wrestling fans are dumb fucks, right? They thought it was just like two Arab Americans they thought it was exactly what it was presented as, right? But they weren't that. They were basically these two Americans who were like, fuck America, right? You hold us down forever, but also, we don't really like you, right? And they had these like, these Arab Muslim-y undertones and overtones, and it made them exceptionally good. Number one, Daivari screaming. He was like 20 when he was doing this. Young boy, right? Daivari screaming and cutting the promos in Farsi, which it's not Arabic, but whatever. Who the hell knew the difference back then, right? That was a good addition to him because Daivari is like the small guy, and it really accentuated the size of Muhammad Hassan. But Daivari has always been in incredibly good shape. So when it was time to wrestle, he fit in just fine. And Muhammad Hassan, the level of charisma that Muhammad Hassan had is almost unprecedented. This guy knew exactly what he was supposed to do. He could come out there, cut a promo, work the crowd, right? Take breaks when people are booing, shut them down when they're booing. He could do all these things perfectly, right? It's almost a shame that this character was not further explored in a much more conventional way. Muhammad Hassan had main event potential. Main event potential, big time. As soon as he came out, I'm like, this is not a jobber. This is not a mid-carder. This is a main eventer. And he had a short but very memorable run, beating people like Shawn Michaels, wrestling against Michaels and Hogan in a tag match with Daivari. You know what I mean? At the main event of like SummerSlam or some shit. You know what I mean? Like, this was a real gimmick. But the way that he cut the promos, 10 out of 10, easy. You know what I'm saying? Easy 10 out of 10. But because there was a bombing in England, right? WWE had basically taken the direction of turning Muhammad Hassan into a legitimate terrorist character, which was stupid. As a result, they had him job to The Undertaker, and he was supposed to be the WWE champion, or the World Heavyweight Champion, I should say. But it didn't happen. And the fact that he didn't get another chance is ridiculous. The guy who plays Muhammad Hassan is like Italian-American, right? So you could give him blonde hair, wait a couple of years maybe, and bring him back, and then, like nobody would know that he's Muhammad Hassan. You could just present it as a new character. Because when he was Muhammad Hassan, he would always wear the little chic thing, the little headscarf thing. So, you could repackage this guy. Because the raw talent under and behind Muhammad Hassan was almost unparalleled. This guy just fit, motherfucks. He just fit. Like, you could have him wrestle The Undertaker, even though this guy's been doing it for like a couple of years, and it's believable that he can beat The Undertaker, despite the fact that Taker is bigger and stronger than him, and in real life would whoop his ass. There is a certain believability to it because of the way he carried himself, wearing a nice suit and everything. Davar over there, cowardly heel, but like a cowardly heel that can kick your ass. This guy was completely misused, right? So that's why, Cucks, after I've just told you about everybody that I just mentioned, which in my opinion are all missed opportunities, that's why when people say, oh, Miro was misused, I think to myself, Miro is nowhere near Muhammad Hassan, you know? So of course he wasn't misused. Miro needed Lana to get himself over, right? Muhammad Hassan had Davari, which was like his Lana, obviously different, right? But he could also cut his own promos. He could also add to it. Miro would just act like a retard while Lana is saying things. And it's like Ivan Drago was this killer, right, in Rocky IV. But he was a refined guy. He wasn't this like, you know, dipshit. He wasn't a moron, right? Like, Miro was presented as a monster. He was presented as like, as Jacob Fatu. Just like yelling, Machka! And he would like kick people in the head, you know? So when I see people like him, like Cesaro, like Nakamura, all these jobbers that bring nothing to the table, and people tell me that these guys, these motherfuckers are actually the ones that are misused, that's when I get pissed. You know? Because I know that there's wrestlers out there. Like, I saw an interview with Chris Van Vliet and Muhammad Hassan. He's like a principal or something. You know, good for him. You know, nothing wrong with being a principal. I'm sure he's doing just fine. But it's more the fact that this guy should have been a multi-millionaire with WWE. Because he deserved it. There are people like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens in this company. There are people like Obafemi and Trick Williams in this company. There are people like Nathan Frazier in this company. But by far the two worst ones are Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. I don't think anybody can deny that. These guys are complete losers, and they're millionaires probably. See what I'm getting at here? Exactly. I rest my case. Cuckolds.